run out, we was in trouble without a doubt. It was On Tuesday's show, Sunil Gavaskar and Matthew Hayden were unanimously voted in by the Zone team and the panel of experts as the two opening batsmen in the SportsMax Ultimate Test 11. Welcome to day 3 of our discussions. The batsmen will continue to hold centre stage over the next 2 days. Going straight up to Friday, in fact, as we discuss batting positions 3 to 5. Don't forget to log on to www.sportsmax.tv/ultimate and select your team. The online votes count for 40% of the overall decision. Today we have a 16-player long list. The panel will be cutting that list to 8, so half of them will be sliced off. We have 3 panelists, and each player needs at least 2 votes to be safe for Thursday's round. Let's look at the 16 players involved. As we say, from this list, 8 will remain after today. Bradman, Sangakkara, Ponting, Tendulkar, Lara, Kallis, Border, Chanderpaul, Smith, Hammond, Sobers, Richards, Chappell, Dravid, Khan, and Javed Miandad. Well, Mariah, before we introduce the panelists, how difficult has this been for you as you sift through these 16 iconic batsmen, because that's what they are. That's why they made the list.
Lance, we have men who have averages over 50. We have a man with a 99.1 average, right? So then it automatically brings him into the discussion. Although people may say, you know, he participated in an era where the bowling was, you know, as Tino Best and they were saying, you know, it was mild bowling as compared to what we deal with now. I just feel like it's a list that you really have to have a passion for one of these players. You really have to have a vested interest, because the list is full of quality. It's a list full of quality.
Yeah, I should remind our viewers and our panelists that after the Test cricket discussion, we do have an Ultimate 11 for T20s and one-day international cricket as well, so you can sharpen up your research tools to get ready for that. Let's introduce our panelists now. Regional cricket umpire Chris Taylor returns after a break on Tuesday, and we welcome for the first time to the discussions Chris Dehring, Managing Director of the 2007 ICC Cricket World Cup, held, of course, in the Caribbean. And from the United Kingdom, we have cricket commentator David Brook. Gentlemen, really, really great to have you in this discussion. And you have come at a very critical and difficult period in this analysis, because as you would have seen, the 16 players are iconic, legendary, and many of them we would have to consider at genius level, and we have to boil down to just 3 batsmen, 3 to 5. Opening comments from the gentlemen. Let's go overseas first. David Brook, haven't spoken to you in a long while, David. How challenging are you seeing this process of reducing this 16 to 3?
Yeah, huge challenge, Lance. I'm still reeling from the shock of not seeing Sir Alistair Cook claiming that opening batting position. I understand he was excluded at the first drop, so I'm still in the state of shock over that. But no, it's going to be tough. This is a huge, fantastic list of names.
Okay. Chris Dehring, haven't seen you since football has been on a break. No over 45 league for us. How does this 16 player list grab you?
Well, it's a great list. The fortunate thing for me is that I've seen most of them in my lifetime. So with the exception of Donald Bradman, I've virtually grown up with this entire group. So it's not that difficult for me. And I always say my overall comment, if you have to go to the statistics, then you probably don't deserve to be in the list anyway.
Wow.
Chris Taylor, serious comments there. Chris, we'll get you to expand on that. Chris Taylor, your brief comment opening on this list of 16.
Yeah, I think it's a royal setup. I agree with David. Tough contingent. I say a lot of quality there over different eras. I agree, Chris, that majority of them we might have seen. I mean, Chris might be a slight bit older than me, but yeah, really good in lineup. Really interesting to go through and do the research on these players, and it's a tough job. It's a tough job. It might just come down to a minor category.
Gentlemen, no Virat Kohli. That didn't bring any questions to you?
Well, the jury's still out on Virat. He's certainly heading towards greatness. There's no question about that. But, you know, you really need to see a batsman at the end of his career to see how he eventually pans out, you know. We need to see Virat on all different types of wickets against all different types of attacks. He looks great, there's no question.
Taylor.
But let us see how his batting technique adapts and so on.
Taylor, any problem with Virat being excluded?
No, I think he might feel hard done by. But as you said, there's a lot of time still for Virat Kohli. He's still well, I don't want to say the middle of his career, but let's see how he turns out at the end. But yeah, he's an interesting leave out. I mean, having scored 27 centuries in 80-odd games, he might think that he warrants a place. He has done well all throughout the world. But as you said, we'd like to see him maybe at the back end of his career.
Okay, let's start looking at the list now. We'll group them in groups of 4, so we'll have 4 graphic presentations of the 16 players. The first 4 will include a player, Steve Smith. Mariah just mentioned about Virat Kohli, who is still playing. Steve Smith is still playing. I must add that his current batting average is 62, which is better than everyone else on this current list, apart from Sir Donald Bradman. But there was some debate about using players who are still active, because things can happen before their career ends and their performances could decline and really plummet them out of this list if we were to have one at the end of their careers. But here's the first list: Alan Border, Brian Lara, Steve Smith, Younis Khan. Let's start with Chris Dehring. Which of the players in this list wouldn't be catching your fancy first up?
Well, Younis Khan, or neither Younis Khan or Alan Border deserve to be in the same discussion as Brian Lara and Steve Smith. And this has nothing to do with statistics. It's really a performance on the day, performance consistently on all continents. As I said in my opening salvo, if you have to use statistics, you probably don't deserve to be on the list. And the reality, though, even Steve Smith probably doesn't deserve to be on the same pedestal as Brian Lara. When you talk about great batsmen on all types of wickets, in all types of conditions, being able to dictate the play, and performing, doing things that are just extraordinary, that's Brian Lara.
Yeah, fully understood. David Brook, your thoughts on this 4, and the ones that don't catch you if you're dwindling down to 8 today?
Well, let me first endorse sentiments of Chris there for certain Brian, Charles, Lara. I mean, one of the true greats, privileged and fortunate enough to see his 375 in Antigua. I saw his 501 playing county cricket for Warwickshire. It's been a privilege to see him play, not just the statistics, as Chris says, but just the manner in which he's played. Just elevates him above all the rest. I would put in a word for Alan Border, though, a nuggety player who sometimes had to single-handedly carry a weakened Australian team. I remember them taking on being the only opposition against the West Indies, single-handedly taking them on in one series. So I'm going to put in a word for Alan Border. Younis Khan I've excluded, just not consistent enough for me. But Steve Smith, well, you can't argue against a player just because he's still going. And a lot of players do tail off towards the end of their careers, but he's shown no signs of that. Since Sandpaper Gate, which we shouldn't hold against him, but is worth a mention, he seems to have come back even stronger. So all credit to him for that.
Yeah. Chris Taylor, your thoughts on this first 4 and who might be out for you when you think of reducing the list to 8?
I agree with both gentlemen. I think Younis Khan might miss out. I think the best of Younis Khan actually came after the 2007 World Cup, which is when a lot of the quality fast bowlers in the world retired. The Glenn McGrath, the Sean Pollocks and so on, the persons who really would have threatened him, I thought. And 22 of his 34 centuries came after 2007. I think the bowling that maybe Younis Khan would have faced at the back end, not necessarily the quality that a man like Alan Border might have faced, and definitely not Brian Lara as well. And I think it's the same problem that I have with Steve Smith. Yes, he's still in his career and so on, but you look at the spin quality around the world. You look at the fast bowling quality. Is it of the same level as some of these other gentlemen in this list of 16? So those 2 for me would have missed out. I agree with David. I think Alan Border came up in a tough time. One of the few people in this list of 16 that actually dominated many batting positions in the Australian order. I thought he did very well as a 4, 5, and 6, averaged over 50. And was good against the West Indies. I think that Alan Border probably could see another day, but certainly Brian Lara, the best of the 4. I think, over a career.
Okay, so 3 men all told. Eunice Can not a favorite among them. So we'll tally that and make a note of that as we move on. Group 2, gentlemen, Sir Donald Bradman, Greg Chappell, Jacques Kallis, and Javid Miandad. Chris Dehring has said twice already that he's not going to allow statistics to be overwhelming in his rating of his ultimate 11. Do I detect, Chris, that Sir Don Bradman's 99.9 batting average isn't overwhelming for you?
There are statistics and then there are statistics. And Donald Bradman averaging 99, I'm sorry, you can never dismiss that. Especially in the days when you are batting on uncovered pitches, you're batting bodyline type bowling attacks and strategy where, that was a very difficult period and he still made runs. So you can't rule him out. But I'm not going to be overly enamored by it, but you can't dismiss somebody who averages 99 over a test series, career.
All right, so Bradman, Chappell, Kallis, Miandad, are you willing to cut anyone from that 4-man group at this stage?
Quickly cut Javed, and I don't want to seem like I'm picking on the Pakistanis at all. He's a very good batsman. There was no question. He made some runs at Sabina Park that was a joy to behold. I also saw him play in Barbados. But there's always going to be a little bit of a shadow over his statistics. It's somebody that never got out in Pakistan leg before or caught behind for many a year, many a series. Just those were the days, and it might be a little unfair to him because a lot of that is just cricket talk and so on. But I would definitely eliminate him. Jack Kallis, obviously somebody that could be certainly one of the top contenders for the all-rounder position as well. Very stubborn batsman, very dominating during the period where he had form. But I still didn't see him as a type of player who could necessarily dominate an attack and set the tone for an inning. So he's but certainly very solid. And Greg Chappell is one of my personal favorites. I mean, aside from Lawrence Rowe, he's probably the most elegant batsman I've ever seen, in terms of technique, in terms of balance at the crease, in terms of style and stroke play. I just love to watch him bat. So I'm glad he has made this particular cut.
Jacques Kallis, 13,000 test runs, 45 test hundreds. Tremendous. Statistically, he is in the conversation, statistically, about the greatest all-rounder of all time, even though Sir Garfield Sobers is widely regarded to holding that spot. So, Chris, you're convinced that Jacques Kallis has to be highly respected here in this group, even as a pure batsman?
Very difficult to leave out Jacques Kallis out of any grouping. So he'll be a hard one to eliminate versus somebody who will walk into a spot like a Brian Lara, as far as I'm concerned.
So you're not eliminating Don Bradman, I think, based on what you said at the top. What about Greg Chappell, the other Aussie in this group?
If I was to pick two that I would not go forward with, would probably be Greg Chappell and Javid Miandad.
Okay, let's move to...
It would be a very hard thing for me to do simply because of my love of Greg Chappell.
Yeah. All right. David Brook, your thoughts on this 4 that we're now discussing and who might not make it for you?
Well, like Chris, I think it's a fair point to say that it's not just the statistics. One's thinking about the manner, in which players score their runs. And for that reason, I just can't have Jacques Kallis in there. I mean, you talk about players that empty bars. He wasn't one of them. I can't remember a single innings. I know the stats are there. It's completely unmemorable. I can't put him in. I'm sorry. No matter what the stats say.
45 test hundreds, David.
Yes, I'm sure. Can't remember a single one of them.
You can't remember anyone.
I may have seen a number of them. I may have seen a few of them, but just can't recall them. And certainly not enjoyable or memorable in any way. Whereas actually Javid Miandad, I can recall. Playing shots all around the wicket, a genuine entertainer. No marks as necessarily all-round human being, perhaps, but as an entertainer and a run scorer on the cricket field, he's got to be. I think he's got to make the cut. Now, Chris talked about elegance and Greg Chappell. I mean, that makes me just think for a moment about a player that's excluded from this middle order who personified elegance, and that's David Gower, who hasn't made the cut. So if we're going to make elegance a criteria, then Gower should be in there before Greg Chappell. The great Sedon, it's so hard, isn't it? All we can see of him is some grainy images in black and white. We've not seen him. You know, I know what Tino Best was saying when he talked about, you know, the quality. You just don't know. We can't judge it. But that is one statistic, I guess, that we just have to, I suppose we have to respect. And it would be a brave person to say, I've excluded Don Bradman at this stage of proceedings.
Yeah, well,
so I guess I'm going to exclude Greg Chappell, who comes second to David Gower, in my opinion, who hasn't made the cut. So therefore, I'm going to exclude Greg Chappell and Jack Callis on the grounds of boredom.
Yeah, David, I can tell you that you have a wild card opportunity if you choose to go there. But let's get Chris Taylor quickly on your views on the best and worst in this four group.
Yeah, let's start with Javed Miandad. I agree with both gentlemen from different points. I thought Javed Miandad came up in a tough time for Pakistan as well. Suffered a lot from the politics and racism as well with Imran Khan and others. I thought very classy batsman, but the overriding statistic for me is that Javed Miandad was very poor against the West Indies generally. Average below 30 against the West Indies, who were the best team at the time. And to me, if you want to get into the greatest, you have to perform against the best at the time as well. And I think that goes against Javed Miandad, as classy as he was and as much quality as he showed. So for me, Javed Miandad is out. I want to make life easier for myself. So I would rather deal with Jack Callis in the all-rounder category. So I would make my 16 a lot easier and leave Jack Callis out of the reckoning for this. But I agree, the stats do show a lot of stuff. But I agree with David that very little memorable innings and didn't win many matches in that test lineup for South Africa as well with the bat. So I would leave out Jack Callis. I think Greg Chappell grew up again in an era of West Indies dominance and showed his class. I think he did very well against the West Indies. I think he was a quality batsman all around the wicket. Yes, a bit egotistical, but I think he deserves to see another day. And as I said, Don, in the first round, you would have to keep someone who averages 100, no matter what the conditions are, and so on. So for me, Javed Miandad out, Jack Callis out.
All right, well, we are getting ready to go to a break when we will look at the other 8 players remaining. But before we leave this break, let's look at the first 2 groups and see, based on what our panelists have said, which would be the players eliminated. Group 1, we had Border, Lara, Smith and Eunice Khan. Now, Chris Taylor, Chris Dehring and David Brook gave their opinions on these players. And of that 4, Eunice Khan, based on the consensus, is out. So, based on our panelists, Eunice Khan is out from that first group. From the second group, Bradman, Chappell, Jacques Callis, and Javed Miandad. I think Miandad will be out, and he is. Our producers making that big red X against the Pakistani. So he is out. Jacques Callis is out as well. Yeah, to be fair to Chris Taylor, he's suggesting that he has him in the all-rounders debate. Definitely. So it's not that he's disrespecting Jacques Callis. So Eunice Khan, Jacques Callis and Javed Miandad are the players out from the first 8 that we have looked at. We go to break now. When we come back, we look at the second 8 players, reminding you that you have until the 22nd of May, you watching this SportsMax Zone program, to make your selections, even way back to the openers who we decided on yesterday from the panelists and the zone. But you can still pick your openers up to the 22nd of May as you can for all the 11 spots on the team. Back after this break.
We'll make the cut.
He was in trouble without a doubt. It was Gavaskar, the real master. Just like a wall, we couldn't out Gavaskar. Every day for cricket. Blue skies and gentle breeze. The Indians are waiting now.
Indian batsman Sunil Gavaskar was so dominant against all opposition, including the West Indies at that time, that Lord Relator, the iconic Trinidadian Calypsonian, penned that one. Really glamorizing the performance of Gavaskar against the West Indies when it was so difficult to get him out. We are back on the Cricket Ultimate 11 discussion for the SportsMax Zone on this Wednesday. You have an opportunity to continue voting until the 22nd of May for your teams. And we have on the line Chris Taylor, Chris Dehring and David Brook deciding which of the top teams will be, top players will be selected in the Batsmen 3 to 5. At the moment, the online selections are favouring Brian Lara at 26.34. We have Sachin Tendulkar at 17%. Viv Richards has 15%. This is our online voting. And Sir Don Brandman, 13. Ricky Ponting in 5th at the moment with a 6.72% votes coming in for Ricky Ponting. And we are discussing at the moment Batsmen 3 to 5, and we have 8 left. And the percentage voting, I might remind you, our panelists, the weight of their opinions will carry 30%. The weight of the zone presenters will be 30%. And you, the viewer, you have a 40% weight coming into the final decision for our teams.
So we move across to Group 3 now. This is a tough group, and I don't know how our panelists are going to be able to cut from this group. We have Kumar Sangakkara, Garfield Sobers, Ricky Ponting, and Sachin Tendulkar. I'll start with Chris Dehring. Can you tell me who will you cut from this group if you had to cut?
I feel like the opener. Why do I have to go first every time? All right. But my friend Chris Taylor, hinted at a good strategy. I'm going to eliminate Gary Sobers because he is the greatest all-rounder the world has ever seen or can ever hope to see. And so it really, you're leaving room. If you're picking a great team, you need to pick some batsmen 3 to 5, knowing that Sobers is going to walk at 6. I'm sorry to preempt that show, but I certainly would eliminate Sobers. So I would probably, it's a tough choice, but I think I would definitely keep Tendulkar. There's a lot of question marks about him on tour. I know that. But of the 4, if you're dropping Sobers, I would probably choose to keep Tendulkar and Ponting. Ponting, obdurate, lots of shots, great against fast bowling, decent against spin, and Tendulkar, which was an incredible overall record. And at the end of the day, you need somebody who is going to be very dominant against spin if you're going to have an all-round strong team, and that was Tendulkar.
Yeah, and just a reminder, you don't have to drop 2. You just pick whoever you want from the list. So I would like to hear from any of the other panelists. Are you in agreement about dropping Sobers because he's an all-rounder?
Elevating Sobers to the all-rounder position, I would rather put it as I think we should elevate him to the all-rounder, because Chris said he's the greatest all-rounder of all time. No pressure on
Coronating.
Coronation. Yeah, no pressure on Jack Callis, who's also gone into the all-rounders category. I don't want to prejudice that panel, but yeah, I think on the basis that we're elevating Sir Garfield to the all-rounders category, then yes, he can be applied in this list. Can I put a big word in for Kumar Sangakkara? Because, Chris was talking about someone who can play spin and someone who can, play in all competitions. I mean, Sangakkara, over 12.5, I think it's nearly 12,500 test match runs, averaging 57. Okay, those are the stats. The manner in which he scored those runs. If he hadn't held the wicket-keeping gloves, he would have done even better for half of his career. When he stopped being a wicketkeeper, we saw his true class. Carried on playing county cricket after retiring from international cricket and just dominated every game he played. He was a class above everything else because he is test match quality. He's, I believe, the greatest batsman that Sri Lanka has produced, and I would argue very strongly that Sangakkara should stay and avoid the cut.
Well, Chris Taylor, are you in agreement with David? I know a lot of people believe that Sangakkara made his runs at the number 3 position. So if we're picking him, are we going to put him in number 3? Chris Taylor.
Well, that's the only place that I could see Kumar Sangakkara batting, and it's surprising you brought up that, Mariah, because I like to look at positions as well. I think that a batsman there's a difference between a middle order batsman that wants to face a new ball or when the ball has a lot of shine, and And a batsman who wants to come to the lower middle order where the ball is older, he bats spin a lot better and so on. I think Kumar Sangakkara, as David said, excellent, averaging 57 and so on, but did have his question marks in Australia, sorry, not in Australia, but in India and South Africa and the West Indies, where he didn't even average 40. And I also like my number threes to be aggressive, and I found that Sangakkara generally was more the accumulator. Right. And it's a tough category, that number three, because you're coming up against the likes of, well, sorry to preempt it, but Viv Richards, I mean, even Bradman and Ricky Ponting, who I thought was a lot more aggressive. So for me, I would agree with leaving out Garfield Sobers or elevating him to the all-rounder position. And I think Kumar Sangakkara would get the cut for me. I would keep Ponting, and I would certainly keep Sachin Tendulkar. All
right, so we see Sangakkara has been getting some traction from two of our panelists. We have to move around now to the fourth group. Let's see who we have there and who's going to make the cut. Shivnarine Chanderpaul, Rahul Dravid, Viv Richards, and Wally Hammond. I'll start with David this time, especially because Chris Dehring says he feels like he's the opener in our pack. David?
Well, I don't think we need to spend much time debating one of these gentlemen. And I'm not talking about Wally Hammond, I'm talking about Sir Viv Richards. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time. He's in. Has to be, not just on the stats, but in the manner in which he scored his runs and his immense presence. Just someone who had just fantastic charisma and presence, of the like of which we may never see again. So he's definitely in there for me. I would exclude Wally Hammond on the grounds that we just don't know what he was up against. I mean, there's no way of judging him. So I'm arguing for Sir Viv. And now, can I put in a word before anyone else does for the two obdurate defenders there, Rahul Dravid and Shiv Chanderpaul. Now, if you had to have one of them to bat for your life, it would be a tough call, because both of them probably would stay in if you asked them to stay in and do a job for the side. Rahul Dravid probably just shades it over Shiv, just because of the sheer number of not-outs that Shiv Chanderpaul had while batting with the tail. I always thought he gave the strike away too readily. But it's tough leaving Shiv out, because the records show that he's probably the most underrated West Indies player of the last 30 years. And I'd love to hear what the other two gentlemen have to say about Shiv Chanderpaul.
Well, I have to ask, do we really need Rahul? Do we need Shiv? Especially because both of them have the same style. Shivnarine Chanderpaul, most runs scored at number 5 in Test history, 6,883. Highest average by a number 6 with at least 20 innings, an average of 66.29. Joined 6th fastest century in Tests. He scored 66 Test half centuries, and he scored 30 Test centuries. So are we going to move with both of them? Rahul Dravid, 4th all-time for most runs scored in Tests, 2nd most runs scored by a number 3 in Tests, a total of 10,524. The highest number of balls faced in Test history, longest time spent at the crease in Tests, and we have the first player to score centuries in all Test playing nations. So gentlemen, I start with Chris Taylor. The fact that both Rahul and Shiv, they have the same playing style, are we going to move forward with both of them? Chris Taylor.
Similar playing style, but I think the biggest thing in that is their batting position. If you look at most of these gentlemen who are in the 16, they're vying for the positions of 3 to 4. And as I said, batting at 5 and 6 is a different ball game. A lot of these guys never batted at 5 and 6, and Shiv has. He has had the most runs at a number 5. He's batted with the tail, and I think that sets him apart from Rahul Dravid, who batted his time at 3. And I personally would leave out Rahul Dravid. I think Dravid struggled against Australia and South Africa, who were the two strongest teams in his era. Didn't do well against them generally. And for me, he can't get in ahead of some of those other number 3s that we're talking about, especially the aggressive ones that put an opposition on the back foot. Sir Viv, for example, who is a sure pick, I think, in this group. So for me, I think that Rahul Dravid would be left out. Based on Shiv Chanderpaul's batting position, I think he can probably make it through to another round, because it's going to be interesting who we select for that number 5 position, because there's not a lot of gentlemen in this 16 who bat there.
Yeah. All right, let's move along to Chris Dehring now.
Well, the fact that you have to put up so many statistics about Shiv and Rahul Dravid proves my point. It is such a hard sell when you're talking about great all-time batsmen for 3 to 5 for people like Shiv and Rahul. You know, great, as you said, temperament when you need someone to stick it out and so on. But if you're picking an all-time batting lineup of 3 to 5, both would have to be eliminated. You know, Shiv, you know, as much as he was valuable to the West Indies, you know, his value to the West Indies was unquestionable. But the reality is that, you know, he averaged higher than Viv. But nobody could ever speak of Shiv in the same breath as Viv Richards. Even today, you know, it's actually quite funny when you see, you know, the great bowlers of the past, you know, walking the corridors. This is something I'm sure David Brook has actually seen. When you see the bowlers step out of the way, I'm talking there now commentators and so on, and they just step out of the way of this big man because they're still afraid of him. He totally changed the game. He totally changed what batting was about in terms of intimidation. He was the enforcer. So he made batting so easy for everybody else because he dominated. So he's in a category by himself. And then if you start to think about batsmen like Viv and put Shiv and Dravid in the same sentence, then we're not talking the same game. So both will be eliminated as far as I'm concerned, just simply because of that. And then you're going to eliminate Wally Hammond because we don't know anything about him. It's just difficult. It might be unfair to him, but the reality is that we know so little about him.
Okay, so we heard from the two Chris's and we heard from David. Let's look back at groups 3 and 4 now to see who are the players who have been eliminated based on our panelists and their assessment of them. There was the group 3, Sangakkara, Sobers, Ponting, and Sachin Tendulkar. Well, all of the panelists feel that Sir Garfield Sobers may be a shoo-in for the all-rounder spot, yeah. So it doesn't make sense forcing him into this 3 to 5, so Sobers is out there. Chanderpaul, Dravid, Viv Richards, Wally Hammond. Of this 4, our panelists have deleted Wally Hammond, yeah, and that's it. The other 3 remain.
So we didn't get rid of it.
We haven't got... Oh, Rahul Dravid is out as well.
Right.
So they've taken out Wally Hammond and Rahul Dravid. But we have to eliminate 8 players. So from the first 2 groups, we had eliminated Yunus Khan, that's 1.
Yes.
That was the first group. The second group, we eliminated Kallis and Miandad.
3 out.
So 3 gone. From this third group, only Sobers out, that's 4. And Dravid and Wally Hammond out from group 4. So we have 6 players eliminated. So gentlemen, your work isn't done yet. We have 2 more players to eliminate. And I guess Greg Chappell was someone that was debatable when we listened to you and your assessment of them. Is he someone, given what we're faced with now, because we still have 10 players in and we need 8 by the end of this segment, is Greg Chappell one of the players that would be cut here? Let's start with David Brook.
Well, yeah, I think he was borderline.
Yes.
So on a strict sort of, he failed on the unanimity stakes. Yeah. And so I think, Chappell would be excluded. I think we've got to look at some of these borderline candidates that are left in still. Yeah. And that's sort of Alan Border, Steve Smith, and Shiv Chanderpaul. I think they're the vulnerable ones. Well, Chris has spoken.
Well, since we have you on, David, cut the other one who you want to be cut, and then we get the other, the Chris's to do the same. So
I'm going to cut Alan Border. I spoke up for Border before. I was the only one. I'm going to withdraw my support for Alan Border. Yeah. It's fairly simple for me to withdraw my support for Aussies, and I'm going to do that one. Chappell and Border to go.
All right, Chris Dehring, who are you 2 of the 10 remaining? Of the 10 remaining, which 2 will you delete? Because we have to.
I would delete Chanderpaul and Alan Border.
Chanderpaul and Border. And Chris Taylor, who will you eliminate?
The challenge I'm having, as I said, is the position of the gentleman. And that's why I guess I was a supporter of Border and Chanderpaul, just based on where they backed, which was very unlike everybody else. I would eliminate Steve Smith, to be honest. I think that the bowling that he has faced is not of the same quality as these gentlemen of yesteryear. And he's battling for a number 4 position, which I don't think he's going to win. So for me, a guy like Alan Border and so on, and Shiv Chanderpaul, who bat at 5, those guys to me, are the ones who are vying for that spot. None of the other gentlemen bat at 5. So I'm actually interested to see how are we going to put someone at 5 who is not used to batting at 5. And I think that makes a big difference in a lineup. So I don't know, Chapel. It's tough. Who else is there?
Well, you have to cut. I think Ponting was still there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And Sangakkara was still there.
No, I would cut. I said from the start I would cut Sangakkara. So for me, if you give me 2, I would cut Smith and Sangakkara.
Okay, so Smith and Sangakkara out for you. I think Chappell is out based on what was said earlier on.
And
so
Border.
on consensus,
And Border is out now.
Chappell and Border are out.
Yeah, because 2 of them said Border.
So Chappell and Border are the last 2 eliminated, so we are now left with 8. I want to say something very quickly before we confirm the 8 that remain and the 8 that have gone. Well, there they are, Jacques Callis and Javid Miandad from the first group. Well, that wasn't the first group, that was group 2 actually. Chappell, Callis and Miandad out from the second group. From the third group, Sir Garfield Sobers has been shifted to the all-rounder status, elevated, so he's not being considered a part of this 3 to 5. Dravid and Wally Hammond are out. Before we leave our panelists and thank them for being with us, I want to make a significant point here because Chris Dehring said something very, very important about statistics cannot be so much of an overriding factor when we decide on. Do you recognize that of the 16 players here on this list, IVA Richards has the worst batting record?
Right, and he's loved by most of the panelists and the online viewers as well.
I'm just saying that he has the worst, and currently he's third online in the voting. But nobody considers IVA Richards number 16 on this list. Chris Dehring, I'm sure you'd agree with me on that.
Absolutely, and that's if you know CLR James said it best. What do they know of cricket? What only cricket know. We all lived through that experience of Viv Richards walking out of a pavilion when we were, 5 runs for 1 wicket, a bowling team on top, and he totally changed the game. And everybody knew he was going to change the game.
Yes.
It was just an amazing, amazing phenomenon that we witnessed that no statistic can capture.
Thank you very much. Chris Dehring, Chris Taylor, and David Brook, thank you for talking to us here. On Thursday, we will be back and we will be cutting down the 8 remaining to 3. And maybe, gentlemen, if you also will be cutting from 8 to 4 because the 3 spots will be decided on Friday.
Definitely.
On Friday, because we have decided that based on the volume of quality that we are being asked to assess here, 2 days wouldn't be enough to cut the list down from 16 to 3. But you can be a part of the process, and we thank you for joining us. On Thursday's show, as we said, we'll be reducing. Can we see the list that's still remaining? We'll reduce this list currently at 8 to 4. So we'll split the group in half. Remaining in the list of 3 to 5, Lara, Smith, Bradman, Sangakkara, Ponting, Tendulkar. Also, Shandapol and IVA Richards.
Y'all are talking about not basing it on statistics, but then when we include Don Bradman in the list, we are saying that, he's 99.9 and we can't ignore that stats.
Yeah, but I think 99 is compelling. There's no one even close to 9. So there's something special about the 1999.
So he's riding on the statistics, but the rest of players will not be judged.
We're just saying that the 50.23 batting average that IVA Richards had, we're not placing a lot of emphasis on that because we know what he does. Because
then there's another criticism in the office. I know we have to go, but that Brian Lara only performed when he wanted to perform. There were a lot of people saying that in the office.
Well, sometimes a genius is like that. They need to be motivated. They need to be challenged.
Okay, Genius Land. So we take a break.
Irapali Prasana, Gigi Boy and Wadika, Krishna Murti and Vishnu Mankan. Them boys could well play cricket on any kind.